Dear Craftworldians, Marko Miladinovic is with you. Welcome to our new tutorial. This time I'm going to paint the mighty Saurus champion. I will cover this lesson in two parts. First one is painting lizard skin and scales, since it is a majority of the model. And second one is sweet non-metallic metal that radiates with power of the old ones. Let's first go to the palette and color scheme. I will use New Paints upcoming range by Broken Anvil. We will write the equal tones of scale artist range, since it is the range we mostly use. I will use cobalt blue, purple and light red, that is something like warm pink, for the underpainting. Then, in overlapping layers stage, for the soft skin I will play around with soft lilacs and pinks. While for the scales I will mix primary blue with cobalt, as well as mixing yellow with lighter blue for more of the turquoise values. I started with underpainting over zenithal primed miniature, applying paints in wet blending technique. First, I build gradients in between cobalt and purple, keeping cobalt in shades gradually toning to purple values. I am adding this warm pink as well as creating further gradients into the mid values of the belly. As those paints mix in wet blending, they become darker. And that is good, since for a good underpainting I want to bring ambience and volumes of the piece visible, but also to secure shades for easier overlapping layers in later steps. For his skin covered in scales, I am focusing more on cobalt purple wet blending gradients, while I'm adding pink only over the soft skin that is not covered in scales. As I apply these gradients over the top of his head, you will notice that they appear brighter. This is the result of zenithal priming. Colors and their tonalities appear different over black and white surfaces. Over black primer, tones are darker and muted, while over white they bring brighter saturation. These paints are thicker than the artist range, and a bit harder for blends. But what I like is their saturation, which stayed constant even with different mixes. With any range you use, make sure to add a bit of water in your Bristol and dilute the paint you are planning to add over the miniature. These paints needs to be diluted enough to have nice flow and can be easily moved over the miniature surface. but not too much, so it spills or washes over the surface. It needs a certain density of pigments that you move with your bristle and soft and easily create blends and volumes of this lizard body. I added a bit of pinkish values on the shoulders as well. Nothing too dominant, but enough to make volumes of the upper body and values of the tone brighter. Same goes for his head. With pink tone, I am brightening the values of the tones and use it in the upper body. Make sure not to lose the contrast. Underpainting tones, even if bright, needs to be darker than the layers that will overlap, keeping the contrast and visibility of the upcoming layers. Overlapping layers, starting from belly of the beast, I'm mixing this warm pink with light blue, achieving soft pastel tone of lilac and pinks. As mentioned, I want to depict its skin very soft around hands, feet, belly and undertail, while I will focus on harder reflection and harder skin around the scaly areas. I'm applying these pastel highlights over the light placement of his belly muscles, forming a definition of the sculpt. When it comes to scales, I'll start by mixing cobalt blue and primary blue to create lighter values. I apply this highlight reflection all around the scale edges and in the middle of the almost every scale, depending on its position on the body. With this, I'm forming light placements of the scales, and by doing that, I'm defining the shapes of the scales and boosting body volumes further. His tongue is even more saturated, and this warm pink invites view to a focal point on the face of this warrior. On his head scales, I'll first apply brighter blue layers, forming light placement. In my next step, I proceed to add primary yellow in the mix, creating warmer values, turquoise as a reflection of the scale highlights. Of course, in this mix, as I proceed to brighter values, I will add white paint. Also, as you may know from previous lessons, with every brighter value reduce the size of highlight, so the previous work stays visible. I will repeat the overlapping layers of brighter blue and turquoise over the shoulders and other parts of the body where I want to boost up the body volumes for better definition. Coming back to his little feet, Again, I focus more on those pink and lilac tones. Over the light placement, upper light values define the volume and details. Adding the same values on this hand and going a bit brighter and softer in contrast, since this is the upper body range that is under more light source. And that is all for today's lesson. I hope you will enjoy it. Stay tuned for part 2 and share your work with us at our Discord channel and social media using hashtags from the screen. Marko Miladinovic signing off.